Welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
Today we're diving deep into the world of business analytics, specifically into this idea of user stories.
Yeah.
So, we always like to kind of frame our deep dives. We read a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
What are some of the key takeaways, and then how can we apply them to our listeners' lives, right? And even if they're not data scientists,
Sure.
even if they're not, coding up the next, the next big algorithm or something like that.
Yeah.
So today we read a bunch of stuff about user stories in the world of business analytics. And we thought it would be really interesting because it's something that we kind of take for granted, but we never really put a name to it.
Right.
And we never really thought about how we could apply it to our everyday lives.
Yeah. And it's interesting how it's something that seems very niche, technical almost. But when you really break it down, it's a way of thinking that can apply to so many different things.
Exactly. And we found, as we were kind of going through the materials, oh yeah, we do this all the time.
Yeah.
And it's so helpful. And so we wanted to kind of untack that for everybody today. So why don't we start with just the basic definition.
Okay.
What is a user story?
So a user story is essentially a way of thinking about a problem or a solution from the perspective of the person who's actually going to be using it. So instead of thinking about it from a technical standpoint or even from a business standpoint, you're really putting yourself in the shoes of the end user and saying, okay, what is it that they're actually trying to achieve?
So taking all the jargon out of it, right?
Exactly.
All the tech jargon, all the business jargon, and just saying, what does this person actually need to be able to do?
Exactly. Yeah. And it's not just about their needs. It's about their goals, their motivations. Why are they trying to do this in the first place?
Right. And how does this particular feature or tool or whatever, how does that help them get there? I like that. So it's really about bridging that gap, right? Between what the developers are building, what the business folks are asking for, and what the actual user needs to thrive.
Exactly. Yeah. And you'd be surprised how often those things don't align.
Oh, yeah.
You think you're building something great, you have all the best intentions,
right?
But if it doesn't actually solve a real problem for the user,
it's meaningless.
It's meaningless.
It's like building a bridge to nowhere.
Exactly.
Nobody's going to use it.
Right. So we keep saying user stories.
Yeah.
They sound kind of, almost like a little fairy tale or something.
Yeah.
But what do they actually look like?
Okay, so they actually have a very specific format.
Okay.
That's designed to be really simple and easy to understand.
Okay.
And it's this. As a here.
Okay.
I want. So that.
Okay.
And that's it. That's the whole structure.
It sounds so simple.
It is so simple, but the power is in its simplicity. Okay, so break that down for me.
Okay, so as a user is where you identify who the user is.
Right.
And it's important to be specific here.
So not just a person.
Not just a person, not a user, but as a marketing manager.
Right, okay.
As a sales representative, as a customer service agent.
Okay, so we're getting really specific.
Very specific, because different users are going to have different needs.
Totally.
Then you have I want, which is the action, the feature, the functionality that they need.
Okay.
So I want to be able to see a graph of my website traffic.
Okay.
I want to be able to download this report.
Okay.
I want to be able to easily contact customer support.
Audit.
So that's the what, right?
Yeah.
And then so that is the why.
The why.
Okay, this is crucial. This is where you connect it back to their goals and motivations.
Yeah.
So as a marketing manager, I want to see a graph of my website traffic so that I can identify trends and adjust my campaigns accordingly.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's how we bring it all together.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense because it's like you were saying, sometimes I'm just thinking if I were a developer and someone was just I want a graph of website traffic, I'd be like, okay, well, what kind of graph?
Exactly.
Who do you want me to show you? What data?
Exactly. And why? Why do you even need this graph?
Right, exactly. And that really clarifies it.
It clarifies it, and it also helps you prioritize.
Yeah.
Because if you know why they need it, you can say, okay, well, that is really important for the business.
Right.
So we need to prioritize this user story over this other one so that is maybe not as impactful.
It's like a hierarchy of needs almost.
Yeah.
What are the most fundamental things that people need in order to be able to even do their job?
Exactly.
And then we can get to the nice to haves later, maybe.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so that's how you write one.
Yeah.
But how do you actually use these things in the real world?
So there are a bunch of ways you can use user stories. One is requirements gathering.
Okay.
So when you're first starting out with a project, you're trying to figure out, okay, what do we need to build?
Right.
User stories can be a really great way to kind of get that information from the users themselves.
Instead of just guessing.
Instead of just guessing, yeah.
Or like assuming.
Or making assumptions, exactly.
Yeah.
Another way is prioritization, which we just talked about.
Right.
You know, you can use user stories to figure out, okay, what are the most important things that we need to build first?
Yeah.
Then there's estimation and planning.
Okay.
So once you have your user stories, you can actually use them to estimate how long it's going to take to build something.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Because you can say, okay, well, this user story is relatively simple.
Right.
So it's probably going to take us a week to build it. This other user story is a lot more complex. It's
Right.
probably going to take us a month to build it.
So you're breaking it down into these manageable chunks.
Exactly.
Because otherwise it's like this big nebulous thing.
Exactly. And it just seems overwhelming.
Right.
But if you can break it down into these smaller stories,
Right.
it becomes a lot more manageable.
And then you're not, trying to build Rome in a day.
Right, exactly.
Just building, one brick at a time.
One brick at a time.
I like it.
And then finally, user stories can be a really great way to improve communication and collaboration.
Okay.
Because like we were saying, it gets everybody on the same page.
Right.
It's a shared understanding of what it is that we're building and why we're building it.
It's like a blueprint that everybody can look at.
Exactly.
Okay, so that makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, so we're kind of going back to what you were saying at the beginning. It's like,
Yeah.
how can we, even if we're not, neck deep in the data every day,
Right.
how can we use this?
Yeah.
So it sounds like one of the main takeaways here is just this idea of empathy, right?
Empathy, absolutely.
Putting yourself in the shoes of the person who's actually going to be using whatever it is that you're building or creating or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it.
Yeah.
And I think the more you can understand the why behind what you're doing, the better.
Right.
Whether you're designing a product, writing a report,
Mm.
giving a presentation, it doesn't matter.
Even just having a conversation with somebody.
Exactly.
It's like, what is this person actually trying to get across? What do they need from me?
Right. And I think the user story format is really helpful for that.
Okay.
Because it forces you to think about who you're talking to,
Right.
what it is that they want and why they want it.
It's like a little mental framework that you can use
Exactly.
for any situation.
Exactly. It's like a superpower.
I love that.
It's a superpower, yeah.
So it sounds like if our listeners take away anything from this episode,
Yeah.
it's number one, empathy,
Empathy.
putting yourself in the user's shoes. And then just this idea of, clarity of communication,
Absolutely.
really getting to the heart of what matters.
Exactly.
And I think the user story format is it's deceptively simple,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really powerful.
Yeah, and I would challenge our listeners
Yeah.
to think about a time when maybe they were frustrated with a product or a service,
Okay.
and just take a minute to write down a user story about that experience.
Oh, interesting.
Like, as a frustrated customer, I want to be able to easily return this item so that I don't have to jump through a million hoops,
right.
and just see what happens.
And then what?
Well, I think just the act of writing it down
Yeah.
can help you clarify your thoughts. It can help you communicate more effectively.
Mm-hmm.
It can even help you come up with solutions.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Because you're thinking about it from the user's perspective,
exactly.
which is really what it's all about.
That's what it's all about.
I like it. Well, on that note, I think that's a wrap. That's our deep dive into the world of user stories.
Awesome.
Hopefully you found that helpful. And we'll see you next time for another deep dive.
Yo.